you want to pass me control?
Oh, you have the clicker. Oh, I see.
Ready?
Yep.
Hello, welcome to IETF 121 NETMOD. Appreciate all those who are joining locally and remotely. I'm Lou Berger. This is Kent Watson. We also have Jim Cummings, who is our secretary, sitting here. Although I said your name with an S, I apologize. There's no S at the end. So many of you are familiar with the Note Well, but some may not. Basically, this is a reminder that we are governed by certain policies and practices. And there's this slide is talking about your contributions to the meeting, and this is a technical focus slide. We have another one that's not technical focused. But please remember that everything you say here, everything you contribute on list, all the documents you comment on or author become part of our IETF body of work, and they're governed by our policies. If you are familiar with them, that's awesome. If you're not, please go to the IETF main page, and there's a link at the bottom. But please go and make sure you're familiar with our basically rules of the road. We also have guidelines on how we interact with each other. We should remember that sometimes we have good heated technical discussions, but those are not personal, and we are required to not make them personal and to always treat each other professionally and with respect. And we do have procedures for if you feel that someone has not treated you properly. And we have many folks who you can talk with about that if that happens. And you never know when it does, and it's not for us to judge as chairs, it's for you to judge as participants. But keep in mind, please keep it professional, even if you are arguing passionately about something technical. Everyone should be signed into MeetEcho. Obviously, if you're remote, you're signed in. So welcome. If you're local, it's important to sign in because we do expect to have some polls. It's also the way that you show that you're contributing to this meeting. We normally have a place to scan up front, but it doesn't look like we have that here. But in the back, there's a way you can scan, or you can click the on-site tool.
It's also hanging on the microphone right there.
Ah, perfect. Thank you. When you do want to say something at the mic, if you're in the room, please make sure to use the on-site tool to join the queue. We want to keep it fair between those who are on-site and those who are remote. And we do plan to use the queue. The other thing we plan to use, and we are using, is our joint note-taking tool. And we ask that everyone who's participating to join and make sure that the discussion is accurately captured. This is particularly important if you make a point, and it's good to go validate that the way it was captured is right. That doesn't mean you get to go change and revise what's actually said, because in the end, we are governed by what actually takes place in the room, what's in the recording, but certainly help make sure your comments are appropriately captured. We have 2 sessions. You've made it to the first. Congratulations. Thank you. The second one is on Thursday, and that will be primarily focused on the new topic of templates. We have a good set of topics for today. I think all but the last 45 minutes, 30 minutes are on chartered items, and they do cover some important items that have gone through last call, and we'll be discussing those. We have a good set of documents in the working group queue. This lists all of them. I want to just call out, let me see if there's some notable ones. I'm looking at the ones that are not on the agenda. Is there anything you want to say about any of the documents?
No.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything actually overly exciting that's not on the agenda. We did have one liaison that actually, I think we discussed this at the last meeting, right? So this was already covered.
That one's impacting the immutable flag.
Right.
Yeah. And then there's another liaison that came in that's mostly impacting scalability, and that's discussed in the second session.
Right.
On Thursday.
We're going to touch on the immutable flag in a little bit, but that's on the agenda, so we'll touch on it there. And we have a question on the liaison response. So as a reminder, we do have tools available for between the meetings. Most importantly, we have the working group list, which is of course where we judge consensus. But we also can have virtual meetings. Those meetings can be formal or informal. Even the informal ones can use the working group resources. Just reach out to us and one of us will set it up. And as a reminder, we do expect to have an update either in session or on the list for every working group document at every meeting. The only exception to that is anything that's been handed off to the ISG, where we've already had publication requests. Those are with the ISG and we're gated by the ISG actions. So and as long as that process is continuing along, we're not going to expect an update from the authors on the list. Certainly, if something notable happens where there's a technical comment from the ISG, you'll see that on the list. And if it warrants discussion, we will have it. It's pretty rare, but we did have that with, for example, syslog. And with that, we're going to move on to system defined. Magic.
Can I have the, oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to pass you control. Oh, you did. This is great. We can both do the same thing. And so it's a little bit of a race for us. That's new.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. My name is Qiu Fang. So this presentation is about an update of system-defined configuration work. So the second working group last call was initiated since after the last IETF meeting, and which is based on the version 8. And thanks to some folks for the comments and review. Special thanks to Eugen for a very detailed and careful review. And he has some pushback comments as well. He thinks that this document is inconsistent as this solution proposed to merge system in to intended, but it also proposed spend a lot of text on how the reference system configuration is copied into running. So you either do copy or you do merge. So this is something that he thinks is inconsistent. And there was some also other comments from Andy, I think, to say that there seem to be some MBC changes being made to the behavior of the conventional non-MDA clients that expect the combined configuration from running. So based on some discussion on the mailing list, the authors have submitted a new revision to reflect a much simpler and cleaner solution, we think, and also maybe could resolve the comments from Eugen and Andy. So the significant change is that we have removed the whole copy related sessions. And this is about the whole copy thing, since we think that this has deviated a lot from the original intention of setting some system configuration for the convenience of clients. So there is a desire to reference the system configuration without redefining it in running. And if we go towards the direction of NMDA, copy is not needed in the long run. And it is also not as easy as we expected before. Actually, it introduced a lot of complexities, like the previous discussion we had related to the copy all versus copy minimum, and how to deal with the stale copy. Let's say if the system configuration has updated and an old copy is still present in running. And also the expensive implementation of auto copy, which refers to the result system parameter definition. So that's also very hard to implement. So even we have removed the copy sessions, this doesn't prevent clients from copy any system configuration into running. For example, if the operator still needs running to be offline valid. And in order not to break the legacy clients and the servers, we also add an applicability statement to say that the solution defined in this document requires the use of NMDA for both clients and servers. So in the context of the interaction between the NMDA clients and servers, the server can validate running by effectively validating intended. And the client would also understand that running alone may not be valid. For example, if there is inactive configuration and unexpanded templates touched in the NMDA work. And also this work as another case about the dangling reference to system configuration. So that's the, I think some significant updates in a new revision that hopefully from the author's perspective is a much simpler and cleaner solution. Okay, so I think that's all from my side. Any comment or question?
Okay, well, as shepherd for this document, it is currently in working group last call, but there were significant comments that were received. And Stefan, thank you for accommodating the comments made by Jürgen and Andy. My opinion is that the document currently addresses and has working group consensus, and therefore would like to bring it to the working group last call again. Yeah. And but if there's no objections to that, then I think it's okay to proceed with publication.
Just to be clear, we're going to run another last call and then bring it to publication.
Correct.
It's not, we're not skipping that step.
Correct.
Rob Wilton, yeah, I think in terms of what you presented, this sounds good. I mean, this sounds like a good direction to go. I've not had a chance to read and review the latest version, which I would like to do. So yes, definitely running another call would be great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Scott, who's in the room. You don't want to share screen. Up here? Yeah, and the clicker will be there. Just give us a moment.
Sorry, I only have 3 slides. Hello, I'm Scott Mansfield, representing or affiliated with, I guess is the proper term, Ericsson. So when the slides come up, I'll know what I'm doing. That's okay. I could. This is about the sub-interface draft and about the interface extension draft that have been going on since 2016 or so. So we have a small update, and then there was an email that I had missed, so that I just replied to the list on. Okay, so as I said, Scott Mansfield, Ericsson, working with Rob Wilton to resurrect these to push them over the finish line, I hope, soon. So this is the sub-interface VLAN model and the interface extension YAG. So to start with the subinterface, it's currently in working group consensus waiting for write-up. So it went through last call. There's a pointer to the data tracker and a pointer to the GitHub. So if you care to look at the issues or the stuff that we've been doing. So what's the difference since the beginning of the year? Not a lot of difference in this one since the beginning of the year. I did some editorial cleanup, and I also changed, there was a example that used an expired draft that was getting people confused about why we had an expired draft in there. So I took it out and rewrote the examples to not use the expired draft and change them from XML to JSON. I know some people like the XML format. I think it's not great. So I changed the examples to JSON and ran everything through Yanglint, and it all works, and that's in there now. I didn't check to make sure that I had done the thing that Mohammed pointed out about making sure that my examples had the right namespace in them. So might need to look at that so that we don't have to, well, it's a long story. Anyway, so that's really the only differences in the sub interface. So if you, I can go to the next slide. So the next slide, the next one is on the interface draft. This is the one that I missed the email. Joey Boyd had suggested a few leaves be added that are related to some statistics related to Armon. So I think we can add those. It's backward compatible. There's no, I mean, they're read only. That's fine, in my opinion. Anyway, I'll talk to Rob to make sure he's okay. I did send it to the list today. And so this one is in the same. It went through last call. The thing that was added since January is that there was a suggestion to add a peer interface container. So that was added, and then I added and fixed the examples so that the JSON is up to date, and otherwise it's been stable since January. So that's, and then we'll add the couple leaves to that one, and then I think that's it. Thanks for your patience.
Any questions? Yeah, since this was part of a last call comment and is pretty straightforward and there's been no objection on the list, once you do the update that includes this, we'll push the submit button.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for carrying this over the line. It's been a long haul.
Well, it should have been
And-
last year sometime, but life
What-
happens. So
The fact that we're actually going to get to it before the next meeting, right? Before
Right,
the next meeting,
yes,
is awesome.
Yeah,
thank you.
great. Thank you.
It'll shorten our workload. All right. Next up,
Med,
we have,
Med is coming.
oh, cool. On the agenda, you're listed as authors.
Okay, so I am the author.
Perfect.
Okay, so yeah, so we'll give a quick update of the guidelines base we are working on. So just a reminder of the deal we have with the working group when we started this work. So basically include the IANA specific guidelines, fix some errata, and then address the question we received at the time from the trust. But since then, there's a lot of issues that we really addressed in this document. The full, I would say, diff is provided on the slides. You can click on it to track the differences with the, I would say, the main document. Since then, we have also all the guidelines that are relevant to IANA and specific to IANA. We work with them, and the even was kind to provide us, I would say, the kind of guidance that they are looking for in this document. The document also passed the working group last call. The Shepherd review was performed. The new versions were released to address that review. Thanks, Hufan, and the write-up was completed as well. And since then, some people just pick up and say, there is something which is not, I'm not happy with it on the document. So we received the comments from Lou. Yes, about the long trees. We had a discussion so that whether the text that we have in the draft reflects currently the views on the working group. We used to have three options there. The ones whether we just pick all the long trees with the folding as an appendix. The other one would not insert the long tree at all in the document, just leave it in a stable link. The other one is to be silent and just provide the tooling, the PNG tooling for people if they want to deal with that. So initially, this was to address one of the comments that we from John. But since then, it seems that the opinions in the work group changed since the first time we have discussion and the last time also we received a comment from Lou. So we ended now by one single option, which is in the document, is that if you have a very long tree, just put it in appendix and that's it. We also include that we also received a comment from Jürgen about the templates for revised, I would say, models, because this is something which is people did the authors of the drafts. They think that for the IANA, they are just, I would say, updating the registration that is there, but the practice is that IANA maintain that registration, but it creates a new one, which is breaking the rules that we have in RFC 6020. So now we are really clarifying this so that we are to be aligned and consistent with the current practices we have with IANA, and included a template so that for the author it will be just easy for them. If this is a new one, you can pick the appropriate template. If this is a revised one, they pick the other one. There's also a comment from Mahesh. This one is whether we need to be explicit or silent. Whether, for example, we have no RPCs which are defined in the document, or if there are no readable, I would say, data node in the document, whether we should be explicit about saying it or just be silent. So far, we don't have any text on this one. We are just silent because this is usually how I would say the RFCs are doing so. I see a value though in being explicit is that this is a signal for the reviewers to say, I have done that check and there's nothing to signal, no need to raise that comment. So that's one positive point I see in this one. So we have the changes for the first 2 points that are already in the GitHub, and the PR are ready to be just committed and submit a new version. But I was waiting for the resolution for the third point, whether Mesh, if you continue to say that this is a point that we need to address, and also for the working group, whether we think that's there's a preferable option for this one. I think that's all what I have so far for this one. And once we fix the, I would say the latest point, I think that we are ready to move on.
Hi, Kent as a contributor. So Lou and I met this morning and we were talking about this, and we're tripping up on each other with the language, long lines. And the problem is that RFC 8792 it says handling long lines, but what it really means is really wide lines, right? Like many columns. But also the word or the the phrase long lines is being used like many lines, like it's a very tall document. So we were thinking maybe we clean up that language just a little bit, like the word long lines, somehow like because 8792 uses it, unfortunately, to mean many, really, let's use it for that purpose. And then maybe many lines would be how we refer to, or large model, something like that. Some other word to express the one.
So I recall that you volunteered to propose some text for this one?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
I think you're confusing the comment on the list from Kent was about he can speak for himself, but about the wide lines.
Yeah, I got the point.
And you didn't have it on your slides, but he also had the point about referencing that RFC. So there's already an RFC that talks about it. That RFC is not the same, doesn't have the same text as the tree document, which you're trying to update. And as far as I can tell, the only thing you've added in this update is, number one, follow the recommendations in the tree RFC, the existing ones, which says you can consider putting in an appendix or leave it out. But that's one thing. The other thing is you're saying don't follow what that tree diagram document says for long lines, but rather use Kent's RFC on that topic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that here. I see that as the only meaningful part that you've updated in that section. So yes. I think that section needs to be cleaned up. One to reference the long line RFC, and number two, to follow, you should, with capital should, follow the guidelines in the tree diagram RFC. The only difference between what you have in this document and the tree diagram RFC is the capitalization of the word should.
No, it's actually more subtle. We have two differences there. The first one is we characterize what we mean by long trees and the two long trees. So that's something which is in the beginning, which is just hand wavy. That's the authors that decide what is long and not long. So now we have really a characterization, 2 pages for what we call more than 2 for long trees and more than 5 pages for very long trees. So that's the first one. The other one is that we don't leave it open for the authors to decide whether they put it in the main document or in the appendix. We are really clear and direct here. You have a very long tree, you don't have an option. If you want to put it there, go put it in the I would say in the appendix. And then there is the comment from Kent. And what I understood from Kent is that he volunteers to provide some text to clean it up.
I don't think
And
it said that on, did
yeah,
you say that
yeah.
on the list?
No, no.
He pointed
Oh,
to me and I laughed.
okay.
but,
No worries.
So
Sure.
so as soon I can do it, but I prefer that you do the check and just let me do word that you want to say there, and we
We'll take a look at
Yeah,
we'll take a look at the revised text and try to close it out. That's
yes,
great.
and one is solved. I think that we are just ready to move on. But yes, that's all. Those are really fair comments. So now for the remaining one from Mahesh.
Actually, okay, go ahead. Well, Joe's next in queue, but
So Joe should go.
Aha. Joe Clark, if you thought wide trees versus long trees was a can of worms, get a load of this. Both Semver and Yang versioning update 8407. I don't know, and I'm genuinely asking if we finally progress Yang Semver and module versioning, if they go into this BIS, if this BIS waits and we add some text here, or if we just continue to have them update whatever this will become.
I actually I looked into this one.
Okay.
And this is one of the purpose I wanted to remind the scope of what we wanted to do, because otherwise we will be doing a base that will be endless. So I think that's my preference here, is that to continue the work that we started with this base. If there is any update that you require, at least in the December, if it is published as an RFC, just do the update there and the change that you want to the guidelines. I prefer separating those rather than linking them. That's at least my conclusion I came to when I checked at least and I wanted actually to make the comment on the list, and then I just refer and say let's see
Yeah,
how.
the timing has now come
Exactly.
closer together, which is why I'm bringing it up now. I defer to the working group and chair. I don't have a strong opinion either way.
We should see how this progresses.
yeah, I'd be open to hearing more comments about this.
So a couple of comments, actually one which I didn't mean to speak about, but I just think about 8407 really being a live document. Have we ever considering the number of edits we keep coming up with every so often? I don't know if the work group feels that a live document would be a better way to do it.
In the past, what we've said is we should just expect an update every couple of years on the document.
Okay.
And whether that is a good thing or not, personally, I think we have to figure out how to publish documents quicker. So if we have a test case that we get used to publishing frequently, that might help grease the skids for other documents. So I'm not opposed to using 84.7 as that,
Sure.
that test case, that rod or prod, I should say.
We'll figure out when we actually publish this and know how many years it has taken to publish. 84.
Sure. Now you are AD, so you get to, tell us how you want us to proceed.
I mean, what I seem to gather from all the edits that are coming, almost dribbling, and I would say, it seems that there are fairly regular updates happening, and it's really up to authors to say, do you feel like you'll be willing to turn around and start making more edits as they come in, or are you done? I'm more than happy to have a page hosted for this, if that's the way the work group feels about it. My personal feeling is that I think it might be still useful to have a page that we can regularly update without having to update an RFC.
Just one question for you, Mahesh. Did you check the web page for the young doctors and all the guidelines? What is the latest time this page was updated?
Something I'll have to go and check.
Okay, you have the answer.
Okay. Anyway, so back to the point about being explicit or silent, the third bullet point item. So when you say the practice so far has been silent about this, this is in the template, or are you saying in general for the documents that use that template? Because I've seen in the documents, it's all over the place. There are some that explicitly call out nodes that they don't talk, like readable and RPCs, or even writable nodes that they don't feel there is a security consideration to be had.
I think it is random as a function of the reviewers of the documents. If you have a reviewers who pick that they prefer to have that statement there, for example, if you are reviewing the document mesh, we will find that statement there. If this is another reviewers, they say that, yeah, it's just leave it and up. And so this is actually the question of, do we see a value in having something which is really consistent here, and then it is worth to include as a guideline or not? That's my point. And currently I am neutral on it. So
Okay. I mean, it's really for the work group to decide. My opinion, of course, is that it's better to be explicit.
I'm sorry, you trailed off there.
You said optional.
I said it's, my opinion is to be better to be explicit about it.
Oh,
Thank you.
Okay, I misheard that.
Yeah.
Thank you for the.
I couldn't hear it all.
I think hopefully perfect timing in terms of what we should do with the documents, things like that, which I'm going to ignore. So I had a comment when I was an AD, we had some security templates questions come up, and I intended to bring that back through this document and raise that at this given time. Was that ever discussed during the processing of this document? So the question in particular is, when I was processing Kent's documents, he had a different interpretation of like the security considerations, where he was saying, the ones like the nodes that you list should be the ones that you probably play like a NACAM default deny policy for writable nodes. Those are ones that are particularly sensitive, whereas listing all your writable nodes and what the sensitivity is sort of makes a very long section, and you sort of potentially miss the sort of key bits of information from the like noise of everything being listed. And I intended to bring that back, and I apologize I haven't had time, but I think that's an important thing to consider. It doesn't have to be now. If we're going to do another BIS version of this, as soon as it's done, it could go into that. But I think it's something that somehow if it hasn't been discussed already, to try and think about that and see if we can refine that security templates considerations, or at least discuss it. Because I think Kent's approach was better. So we'd have a conversation about that. Lou's looking lost. You think, why are you raising this
No,
now?
no, I'm trying to remember. I thought we had a website that
Yeah.
gave us the template
We,
that Benoit set up
Yeah.
many years ago.
oh, it's Benoit's fault.
No, so he ran the experiment of part of the document being in a web page. Have you looked at the web page and thought about how to update that?
Yes, ages ago, not recently, but I have a feeling again that the migration of the web page into this document, I think the semantics of it changed slightly. I think Kent was saying he was originally involved when that text was being created the first time round, and what was created and what it's ended up being is sort of it's deviated from where it was. And I'm just wondering today whether we're doing a lot of extra busy work that isn't necessarily helping people.
Yeah, I think if you could suggest how you think the text should be fixed on the list,
Okay.
that addresses the specific comment. And then the general comment of we should look at this security template webpage and decide whether that's a better approach for the whole document or not. My only additional perspective on it seems that we've like forgotten this web page or maybe got it wrong, and we haven't been updating it. So it seems like it suffers the same problem as the RFC, and maybe worse because we don't have a formal process to updating it. Additionally, I have found another case where there's something clearly wrong in one of our wiki pages. And I asked the person who owns it, how did this happen? He goes, I tried to trace back and we can't find it, nor can I find any foundation for this. So I'm a little hesitant to lean to a wiki or a web page and say that's the definitive place to capture things, and maybe just figuring out how to run our process faster is better.
Yeah, I wasn't saying as to where to put the solution. It's just like the moment it's in this
Right.
document.
So that's
yeah.
why I tried to
Yes.
separate out,
Yeah.
the list is the right place to propose the text. And if it's really quick, then we as a group can decide whether to get it into the document. And if you're a little slow and this document gets submitted before, okay, we've also made the decision for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just one additional comment on the security part of it. So when we started to modify the template and so on, we circulated on purpose to the SAG mailing list 2 times from the security group to see that if there are any specific item that they want us to I would say, to clean or to word better and so on. We received some few comments. One of the comments that at least I see that's we need to leave it to the authors to decide. They say that's there are some adjectives that we are using there. For example, for the sensitiveness and vulnerability, they say that's you don't need to be that explicit. You leave it to the authors so that they just only focus on the key ones. We don't need to have every specific bits which is that have privacy or sensitiveness to be listed in that document. So it is up to the taste of the authors to find the appropriate, I would say, level of details to be included there. We trust the authors will do the job. So that's why we also modified in a template to have this, to see that you have to assess whether this is major or not, and so on. So we modified, we circulated with security people 2 times at least. And if there are any additional points, Rob, we are, just tell me how to fix it, or if there is any problem on those to be fixed.
Okay, because I thought I was checking the latest document and I thought it wasn't clear to me. So maybe I missed something or something, but I will check.
Yes, and the other comments I wanted to make is the latest time the template was changed was to update the RFCs about the TLS, and is Warren who changed it. We have actually the record of the people who modified the templates. But if there is something which is missing, is that we don't have any procedure to restrict or to leave it to the ED, for example, to decide which wording or which aspect need to be modified to the template. So far, the ED can go and change it in the wiki. Do as a working group accept this, or we oblige first to come to the, I would say, to the working group to have a consensus on it. So I didn't wanted to open all of this, but if you want, Rob, you see the kind of form we open. So please don't do that.
I'm walking away from that.
Okay, so please.
Benoit Claes. So on this one, whenever you mentioned that there is no specific process for that, I believe I was the one who updated it last time. And what we did is that we got the input from the young doctors. I believe also the mailing list. And then I went through the IESG to see if it was the right thing to do. Because in the end, we put a security consideration sometime for other ADs. And I believe this is what the right process is. Now, it's not formally written anywhere, but this is the one that makes sense. So we have to see if there is something broken that needs to be fixed here, because somehow it seems to me it works. Now, whether you say deny or include, do what's right. So I'm not sure we need to have a process and more process here, specifically the time when we try to extract part of the things like a young model, maybe outside of an RFC. So maybe there is nothing broken.
Yeah, and just one additional comment to what Benoit mentioned is that we don't want the template to be, I would say, rigid. That means that it's flexible. It's up to the authors to do their homework. It's just a guideline to them. Use the part that are really interested from them, but we don't say that you have to go that way and so on.
And the only risk there is that when it comes to the ADs, the SEC ADs doing the review, and they flag discusses because like you haven't included these parts. So just everyone needs to be on the same step as to everyone's reviewing it's the same set of rules.
So I went back and looked at the wiki page on the security guidelines. It was last updated on 7th of February this year, and it was done by Cindy Morgan. So Benoit is right that the process is that it goes to ISG and we place a request for it to be updated for whatever the working group has agreed as the current set of guidelines. And if you want, I can reaffirm that in ISG and say this is the process. But if you want, I see that the page is actually fairly up to date, except for the latest changes Kent you had proposed as part of your draft. So maybe those need to be edited and added. So that's point number 1. Number 2, I did check that language and it says if there are any RPC operations. So if the word if is there, it tells me that only if you have something, then you put it or document the fact that there are nodes or RPCs defined. So I stand corrected in terms of whether it should be explicit. At least the template seems to imply that only if you have, then you list them.
Yeah, just one comment
So
for your...
before you go there, I think you just highlighted a really key point. Did you know that the template was updated?
No.
It was on the list. It was on the list, this one.
Who initiated the request for that update?
That's a very good question. That would be before my time.
And who approved it?
I can give you the context.
we have the working group chairs in the room. We have the previous AD in the room. Were any of us in that approval chain? No. So there may be a process for updating that, but
Right.
it is outside this working group. And that is, we should decide if that's a good thing or not.
Okay. I mean, I'm for the work group to say, these are the latest set of changes. You or whoever, the 80, can you have it updated? I mean, if that's the process we want to define.
Yeah,
I am all for a process where the working group has input and we understand how changes happen, they get approved. To my knowledge, the only one we have that does that is called an RFC. Now, if the ISG wants us to give another tool, that's awesome. We'll use it. But as a working group, we can only use the tools that the ISG gives us. And my understanding is the only way we can actually do that formally right now is an RFC.
Yeah. Just one comment on this part, Lou. I think the change from Cindy is not on the template itself. There is a broken URL there, which is because they migrated the wiki that the IETF used to have to the new one.
Sure.
So only what she does is she fixed I would say the wiki URL. And this one was discussed on the mailing list. And this was a generic, I would say, comment from, I don't remember, so the colleague who made the comment at the time, and he found that this is broken. So, and I think that he has contacted the secretary directly to fix it because it is cycling. So for the Cindy change, it's not about the template itself, just to clarify this one.
Yeah,
It's
Bigno
on
just
the-
corrected me that it could be possible that the only change was maybe a typo or something that was fairly.
There is a diff, but I think we're down a deep rabbit hole and we're over time. So maybe we should move on, but it's a good rabbit hole. Thank you.
Well, just quickly, responding to Lou's point about, I mean, now that 8407 is doing this, or BIS is doing this, does it eclipse the ISG statement? Should that statement be removed and now we defer to 8407 BIS?
Or maybe we update the page with whatever 8407 publishes.
All good questions.
Yeah. So for the last point, is there any, should we go explicit or not explicit? No explicit.
I think the follow-up for what's on the screen is we have to evaluate the next version and we have to discuss it on the list. There's at least one point that was made that I know technically I disagree with. It was a quote about what's in the RFC and what's not. I'll put the quote on the list. It has already text that covers the topic. We can discuss on the list. We have to go through each one of the points. You know, Mahesh may or may not say he wants to do more. Let's see the updated text. And we have some text also from Kent that's going to come in. Joe looks ready.
Hello, I am Joe Clark, and these slides were created about 20-30 minutes ago. I went into the wrong room this morning looking for Green, found Lou, and he said, would you please update your slides? So pardon to my co-authors if I did anything wrong here, please keep me honest. This is an update to our Yang module versioning and Yang SimVer work with Pear's work on file naming. So we thought we were there. We are now in a third last call on this work. These are the 3 drafts. Check. We've got them. Lou is our shepherd on all 3. Check. The working group last call technically concluded on the 25th, but we got some comments, feedback from Jürgen on the 1st. So the timing was a little compressed. Jürgen left a very comprehensive review on all 3 documents, which we greatly appreciate. Some of his comments obviously will be incorporated, but there were some key points that fell out. These aren't the only points, but these are some that we're going to focus in on in the remainder of this presentation. The key point in file naming was around making sure that he wanted revision dates to always be included so that there's compatibility with 1.1 Yang 1.1 tooling. For module versioning, there was some talk a while back, and the authors went back and forth on this, about creating extension statements at the node level rather than at the module level to identify whether or not there had been non-backwards compatible changes. And then with Yang SimVer, we want to clarify, or he wants us to clarify the necessity of the modifiers. So you remember that we have these underscore compatible and underscore non-compatible modifiers in Yang SimVer in order to support this limited branching. And he had some confusion there. So we want to clarify these points. Now, when I wandered into Liffey Hall B this morning, Lou's like, we would really appreciate if instead of just saying, we'll get back to you on the list, that we put in some slides with some author thoughts on this. This has been a multi-year project. We do appreciate the feedback, very much so. What are our current thoughts on some of these bigger key issues? So I took a stab at doing that for each of these key issues.
If you don't mind, I should have jumped in queue. This is Lou speaking as Shepherd. So my hope is that any comment which is add clarification that you just accept and
Yes.
address just like any other last call comment.
Exactly.
Any comment that has a technical change, I'm hoping we can discuss the technical change and get a feeling from you, a feeling from the room on the right way forward. Now that is all very quick because it hasn't been fully discussed. So I'd like that to be the foundation for the future discussion. So we hopefully on the list, so we can hopefully move more rapidly to closure on the different open issues. So that was my reason for asking, and
it was great
setting the stage for what you're going to talk about, and hopefully how the group responds.
It was good reason. I'm glad I got poked to do this or prodded. Per has also replied already, I think today, on the file naming thing as well. So again, I have what Jurgen's kind of distilled point was. The set in RFC 7950, the revision date on the file is actually optional. So it doesn't necessarily need to be included. We did discuss, and in fact, for those of you who may use the Yang module's GitHub repository, you notice that in the RFC directory, there is the canonical module at revision, and then there's a symlink, just module.yang to that. So you can have multiple file names, and this could include the assembler version of the file, like I have IETF yang foo #123.yang. It could include that, but in the draft, we have language that said one should be published. There should be a canonical version, and the semantic version adds some more human guidance to it. So that is, I can look at this semantic version and I can kind of get an understanding of how that fits to a previous version of the module. And the kind of the prodding we got from the chairs was we shouldn't walk away from this issue. We shouldn't try to dodge it. That's why this draft exists. We pulled this out of Yang module versioning, created it as a standalone. We didn't want to make this some sort of ad hoc thing that floated up. We're already seeing some vendors, some groups start to use this type of thing. So we're not trying to shy away from this. And our opinion is we should have this one version, and this should be the format, hash and then the Yang semantic version. We do not really want to reincorporate this into another draft at this point. Thoughts, additional comment? I don't know how much time we have for discussion. I don't want to blow your time. Yeah.
But we give priority of the working group time to working group activities. So this is an important one.
I'm being a conscientious person.
So I think Kent is getting together a poll.
Okay, cool.
To see if those in attendance support the approach. Rob?
And I was just going to speak. So the reason we pulled this out initially is because we wanted not to slow down the versioning work. That was the whole aim. And then to see is what's consensus is, if we publish it, do we go forward? Or do we ditch this work and delay it and basically progress the other work? So I think that's the key thing here is sort of knowing whether we want to go forward with this.
Why did he put it out there? I know.
He sees it.
Hi, Per Andersson. I said on the list to respond to Jürgen that we could include it in another draft, but I agree with Joe's comment that it should probably be a separate draft, and as Rob said, to progress the other work so it doesn't stall. Thank you.
There's kind of two questions.
Otherwise, just to state your slides, and they reflect what I responded.
Okay, thank you. One is Rob's point. Should we continue to progress this along with the other versioning work? We, as the authors, think yes. We were told not to shy away from this. And then the second question is, should this be the kind of the form we encourage people to use.
Yeah, so there's an implicit response to the first one. Yes, let's move on to the second one. So here we are at the second. We have we don't have a heavy participation in the poll. And obviously anything we do here, we're going to discuss on the list, but the fact that we're getting a couple of no's, if anyone who's saying no would be willing, it would be very helpful to us to understand why you're saying no and what you would prefer. So I'd like to solicit, all right, so we got Andy in queue. Or Andy at the mic.
Oh yeah, I guess I should have gone in queue. Sorry.
It's okay, you're perfect. Go right ahead.
I think it's been brought up before that doing this on top of Yang 1.1 is the problem. That if there was an NBC change made and it's Yang 2.0 and you change the file names, that's something else. But this does impact existing Yang 1.1 tooling. So that go looking for the file names, and now the Semver version will be one, so they would have to create their own symlinks as opposed to just continuing on with revision dates. I'd also note that OpenConfig didn't feel the need to change the file names, even though they have the Semver in the modules. But so that's my comment. Sorry.
As chair and poll maker, the poll says long-term, and the intention of what was our long-term aspiration. I think this could be considered as, or maybe the working group should discuss as when we would want to indoctrinate this, but should it be part of Yang Next, or could we do something earlier? But Andy's point is salient.
Yeah, I think this is for use until we have Yang Next, and Yang Next gets to tell us what they're doing once that happens.
We kind of wanted to put this out there because when we did pull it out, we thought, well, there might just be an ad hoc kind of thing people do, and it just happens, and normal or organic way the industry does this, and there was concern that if that happened, that there would be multiple ones of this. So that's why we wanted to kind of draw this line in the sand, and the hash was something we went back and forth on. We found this to be the least problematic character. We couldn't reuse the at. So if we standardize this, if we RFC'd this now and we say should, we think that it wouldn't necessarily break that tooling because you could still use the at revision.
Okay, well, I appreciate the feedback, appreciate everyone who participated. It gives us some indication of where the working group is. Clearly, we'll have some more discussion on the topic. Let's move to your next slide.
Module versioning. So the main or one of the key things that Jürgen brought up was this node level revision extension. So the way it works now in module versioning is there is a top level child of revision extension statement that indicates whether or not non-backwards compatible changes have been made. We did discuss having a leaf level or node level indicator. We thought it would over time clutter modules, and we know that there is part of our initial requirements was there should be a tooling draft that addresses how you would be able to spot what the non-backwards compatible or what the backwards compatible changes were between two modules of two versions of the same module. So that's where we think that work will be done. Not to do the per node extensions, but to rather have the tooling do that. And we also recognize, not listed but in Jürgen's comments, he was talking about, do these extensions change the semantic meaning of modules? We do believe that these are optional, that truly if the tooling ignores these, that they're there to provide guidance. They're there to let a human, for example, know for purposes of tooling the impact to tooling, to be able to say, be aware that non-backwards compatible changes have occurred. This is where the tooling draft will come in to point out what those changes were. With the other extension around recommended min date, we soften the language around that to make it, when doing import by recommended min date, to make it less of, in fact, that's why we use the word recommended, to make it less of a hard requirement, and again, more advisory. So if tooling does ignore this, they'll find a module, perhaps in a repository to load. Whether or not it works will depend on how compatible that module is with the modules that are including it or importing from it. Rob.
Just was going to echo what you said. I think we've discussed this issue quite a lot, and we do have a future extension that could do something like node level versioning. I'd really like not to reopen a can of worms here. I think it will never get it complete, and then people will give up. I think this has been discussed, this has been done. I see this as a closed issue. It's just my opinion.
Rashad?
Yeah, I mean, like Rob, I remember we discussed that extensively. One issue we discussed then, and I don't remember how we closed on it, is what happens when you remove a node. You've got no node to tag to say there's been a non-backwards compatible change. So you need to go one level up and say at your container that the node below was removed, so it starts losing its appeal. Anyway, that's the vague memories I have of the discussions we had. Thank you.
Balash, good to see you again.
Hello. I think this the whole topic of Semver is extremely urgent because I have heard 2 other SDOs who are considering implementing their own solution. So big new topics like this node level extension should be avoided. Thank you.
So Kent, as a contributor, I just want to agree with Rob that I think that this should be deferred to later, like node level extensions. Right now, module level seems sufficient.
Okay.
Yeah, and before we move to the next slide, this is Lou as Shepherd. I think our prior discussions have been well captured in the discussion here today, which is that we've covered this topic before. We have an alternate path available to us, and for simplification standpoint perspective, it's been kept out of this document. So I think we should take this item as closed, and that we expect a contribution and a draft to cover how we could do node level, and we'll discuss it in that context.
Okay.
In the future.
In the future. No, right. I'm not, there's those who would like to do node level should come forward with a draft. We're contribution driven in this case. Next slide.
Thank you. My final slide is on
Try one more time.
There we go.
Semver, Yang Semver. So I've once replied to Jürgen. I have to go back and re-reply to him. But one of his key points was going back to these modifiers. Again, we have, I'll be brief. Underscore compatible was a way to say, if I have, and I have it in kind of an example down there. Let's say I have a 1.2.2 version of a module. I also have published a 1.3.0, and I have a customer who wants a leaf added to their 1.2.2. They don't want the full 1.3.0, but they're a paying customer and they want a 1.2.2 with this additional leaf. In order to do that, this is where the modifier comes in. I would add the leaf and publish a 1.2.3 underscore compatible to indicate that it's backwards compatible to 1.2.2, but there is otherwise what would be considered a minor change, an addition to that module. We also have an underscore non underscore compatible. If, for example, instead of that one adding a node in 1.2.3, I needed to remove a node. I needed to create a non-backwards compatible change. I would then create, and let's say a 2.0.0 had already come out. I would create a 1.2.3 non-compatible. And there was some confusion of why do we need these? We started out with regular old Semver, which, by the way, they weren't even very adherent to their own rules, and we had to actually add some additional guidance in our draft to clarify where branching can occur. And we found that even the Semver didn't quite satisfy all the use cases like the one I just talked about. So that's where we came up with these modifiers. And we decided that this would be the limit to the amount of branching that we would want to do, because we had actual use cases, for example, from vendors and their customers who wanted to do this. So that's why we're having them. Now, this doesn't mean that you can do infinite levels of branching. And certainly when it comes to merging, we in a very recent version of the Yang Simver draft, we've said that if you have something like a 1.3.6 and a 1.3.12, for example, we enforce that 1.3.12 inherits from 1.3.6, that there is no like divergent branches there, because we want to make sure that as far as we can enforce, the rules are clear, that you can expect that what comes in 1.3.12 is compatible with some editorial changes back to 1.3.6 as an example. So this is why we have it. And this is why the and one other thing, if you see the modifiers like compatible and non-compatible, you cannot assume that, for example, 1.2.3 underscore compatible is equal to 1.3.0. They may have different content. If the compatible branch is kind of, they're sticky and they break that rule. But in the strict Simver, if you don't see any of the modifiers, that we try to follow the rules. Well, not we try to, we do follow the rules, or we document in our draft and point back to the Simver 2.0.0 rules that say this is what you can expect in terms of non-backwards, backwards, and editorial level changes. Yeah.
Andy. In the queue.
Yeah, I like a lot of the Semver except these modifiers. I think you're trying to pack too much into a version string. There's already Yang extensions in the Yang module that clearly show the backward compatibility chain. This is really hard to understand, and the whole thing handed off to the community at large. This is the part that's really going to confuse people, and how it changes comparisons and everything. I just really would prefer this a lot better if this was just left out of the version string.
This is going to be, I agree with you, Andy, this is going to be the most, this has been where we've had the most discussion and tried to do this much of the clarification. We feel that in general, these will be lightly used. That is, we don't think the IETF is an example, and maybe any SDO will use these at all, but we do feel that there is a use for them. And that's why we've, I guess, pushed to keep them in there all this time. We don't expect to see a lot of them, but because of that use case, if we reopen this and the working group absolutely says, no, we can't have them in there, okay, but we every time we've talked about this amongst ourselves, this becomes a sticking point. We have use cases, people just keep bringing them up. Well, how do we do this particular thing for our customers? And that's why we've not pulled them out. Rob?
Yeah, Mahesh is queuing for me because my clients died, so I'm not in the queue. Oh. So, so what I want to say is, I feel like this is sort of going around in circles. Yes. We've created this Semver, a variation of it for good reason, in terms of we need to be able to support people who've shipped previous releases, and we need to put bug fixes on, and that's why they're there, is so that when you've shipped a given module version, when the customer comes along and says, I need a fix, you don't have the option. We don't have the option to say, oh, you have to upgrade your software and maybe your hardware to the latest version to use it. We need a way to be able to get your fix out for that module. So that's where this has come from. I think there's a strong market requirement to support this, and I don't think we should be going back. I think we just need to say, look, I know you may not like it, but we've had this discussion many times. I think we need to close and move on, because again, otherwise we're never going to publish anything here.
Yeah, well said.
I do think if there's an opportunity to help clarify in the current document, that would be great. I think it is very confusing, and Andy is not wrong that it's going to lead to a lot of confusion. So anything we can do to help avoid that would be great. I think no matter what we do, we'll still have some confusions, but if, any minimization at this point would be helpful. So I think taking the different viewpoints that are being expressed on the list and trying to address them is a good thing.
Happy to try and clarify.
Yeah.
No issues there. I mean, that's fine. We make it, but changing the direction now again, that's the thing I'm opposed to.
So I'll go a step further. We've included some examples. I would really appreciate if there's other suggestions on how we can help clarify. We've tried it with by example, which helps me at least visualize why I might need this. The bug fix has been the kind of the textual, but we've even done it in kind of like a tree form. So if there are suggestions that would help, yes, Jürgen did have some clarifying additions that we'll look at, but we're open.
Okay, I think we've closed this, but I see, Samir left the queue. All right, thank you, Joe.
Yeah, I had one more example I wanted to give you, but that's an offline one. But
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. So we definitely have run a little over on the chartered items. We're now going to move, I'm sorry, on the last call items. They're now going to move to the chartered items. We're going to try to keep them at their allotted time.
I don't know what the time is.
Well, I'll give you a timer.
Fine. Yeah. I'll try and be quick anyway. So
yeah, you had 15, but I'll give you 10. And if you go over a little bit,
fine
with it and squish someone else.
So effectively, it's a Yang packages. So we were working on Yang packages ages ago. I don't know, 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, and then effectively with the versioning work, that all got sort of took precedence and got very slow. We stopped doing any updates to packages. Really, this is just an update to say we've picked the work back up again. We're looking at now trying to progress packages, and we want to try and progress it fairly fast. This is on the assumption that we get these other documents published. So just a reminder in terms of what the set of drafts we had 5 drafts there, like this set of versioning work, ignoring the file name one that was added in later. But the module revision handling and Semver, those top 2, those in last call, hopefully being done very soon. And the Yang packages work was like the next step, the next one we want to try to tackle. So we were discussing it at the same time as the last calls on things a few years ago, but we sort of got rat holed in terms of complexity. We were trying to maybe handle too many different things. We were saying, should packages be able to represent like an API style package that you might use for IETF to define how all the modules might fit together, with lots of being optional and optional functionality. And when we were sort of delving into that and also taking into account like schema mount and the further complexities, we got rat holed into what does this look like, and the complexity was expanding. When we brought it back again, we had a sort of proposal and idea of let's try go back, let's try and simplify it, let's try and do the sort of bare minimum viable package product. And so that's what the update's done. So update 04 that I published doesn't have full consensus of everyone within the design team, hasn't had that time. It should fix all the compile errors and things like we were having before. That was the aim, to get all the references back up to date. And it sort of shows a direction of where we're thinking maybe in terms of the schema mount stuff. But again, it doesn't have the text, and that's very rough at the moment. So there's a few issues that we were going through and trying to discuss. And this one I first already covered, like what does a package define? Is it just a hierarchical equivalent of Yang library with more flexibility of how you build it? Or should we be trying to define like an API package that might define, like the IETF might use to define how its sets of modules or subsets of its modules work together? I could take a routing package and it might have BGP as being optional to implement or something else. Or the alternative, and split with the API packages, then you have an implementation package on a device that says, this is the exact schema, this is the exact set of modules I support at a given package level, and these are the versions of those modules I support, along with features and any deviations. But what we got to was, let's try and keep it simple. So let's not have that distinction. Let's not try and to like boil the ocean and do too much here. Let's just make package like a more hierarchical definition of Yang library. And then that way it allows you to build up these different blobs and things, and doesn't try and build something new in terms of optionality that isn't there already in Yang. And anything else, you just have to use features and deviations if you want to take stuff out. So that's the direction we're going to for this sort of particular issue. Next one, almost related actually, is should packages be allowed for including optional child packages and child modules? So it's the same sort of question. And if you have flexible packages, it might give more flexibility in terms of what you're defining. And this came up for, like, if you're representing a schema mount instance in a package definition, where you might say, you might find under network instances, you might find BGP, you might find ISIS, you might find both of them together, all this optionality. It's like, no, this is too much complexity. Trying to define this, trying to represent those became hard. Let's just say no. Basically, what a package then becomes is whatever specified there is, we guarantee you'll find at least that. So if it says you're going to find BGP mounted at that location, you'll find BGP. You might find other things, you might find augmentations and things, but effectively the package definition is this is what the schema is for what's there. You may find extra stuff. So keep it simple. Package just defines what's there, no optionality beyond Yang's existing mechanisms. You still use features and you can still use deviations. Next one, there's not too many of these questions. What should packages indicate about deviations? This one didn't quite get to any consensus with, and this was because maybe you were implementing an IETF package on your device, and you want to say, but I want to deviate these things. And so you build a vendor package that is a combination of what's in IETF with some deviations and augmentations. And the question was really should we say anything about the fact that your package definition includes deviations or not? And the choices were, we say nothing at all. Effectively, when you build that package definition and you put it into PyYang, it's going to take into account any deviations in the modules that are there. So it's already included. Do we indicate a flag at the top level to say this package has deviations somewhere in it, but no more details? But then the question comes up, well, will people who are building these packages get it right? What happens if you don't set that flag, but you include modules that do have deviations? So is it a risk of more confusion by having the ability to set the same information in two places? And then the third one was to go one step further, which is a bit like Yang library, and it lists effectively which modules are deviated. You know, you could go that one step further. And in the past, we took that out and we thought that that's too much. At the moment, it's not clear as to what the group, when we discussed this, was, and we only discussed it over a couple of weeks. I think it was sort of leaning towards doing A or maybe B. I think C was ruled out as we want to do that. Again, we want to keep them simple. One more, should packages support schema mount? And again, schema mount adds complexity, but and it's not really used in OpenConfig and vendor models. I don't think use it so much. But if you want to support the IETF models, or anyone who does want to support IETF models, then you effectively need to do schema mount to build any sort of non-trivial device. You need network instances, and then that's how the IETF models are designed. So I think the sort of feeling that that we thought, some necessarily think that schema mount and doing something with there is necessary. And it's a matter of how do we do that in a sort of fairly minimal way without too much complexity, which I think we can do. But the two choices were like no or yes. Yes, we do, but some minimal set. Again, the consensus wasn't clear. I think the leaning was towards us doing something, but again, trying to sort of keep it fairly simple. It does have some levels of complexity that come in because you want to be able to represent that I can support different packages mounted on like different VRFs, for example, or difference between an L3 VRF versus an L2 network, L2 VSI or something. So there you need to have some sort of path to identify those. But again, I think that that's a solvable problem, and we can have some ideas and we can get something out and be able to say, look, this is our idea. Does it work? So that's still been discussed.
You do have a couple of people in queue. I don't know if you want to take it along the way.
I'll take it at the end. I'll go back. Should packages include checksums? So the question is effectively this idea of being able to use a package to be able to confirm exactly what the schema you're going to get and what the modules are. So you got a package definition off the device. It has a checksum. The device, when you ask it for its package definition, what it's going to use, it gives you back the package definition and the checksum. You can say, oh, this is the same. I know it's got the same set of modules or not. But the concern was, is this adding more complexity than we need? How do you do these checksums? Is it over the textual content of a Yang module or not? Or do you have a normalization of that Yang module to be able to generate a checksum? So it sort of got tricky. Do we want to do this canonicalization or not? Is it useful, etc.? Is SHA the right answer for doing this? And so at the moment, I think the consensus is leaning more towards let's not do this now. Let's try and keep them simple, but we could add it in future. But if there's a burning requirement for this, it would be good to hear about that and we'd take into account. don't know, this is my last question. Yes. So the sort of summary is basically we've picked up the packages work again. We're actively working on it as long as we don't get wrapped around the axle again with the last call stuff and making progress. We do have a sort of weekly call discussing this. If you want to be involved and influence this, now is a good time to get on board and join those. And we'll start a new round of meetings after this IETF meeting, and we're happy for everyone to sort of join in those calls.
Yeah, and please just re-announce it on the list just so people refresh, or you refresh the pointer in people's email.
Okay. And then the last comment is the key one here is which I'm really asking for is rather than the specific issues is, do you agree that this is the right direction? Let's try and keep it simple. Let's try and get it done more quickly and get it out the door. Thank you.
Mahesh, I very much want to support this effort. And I don't know about API packages per se, but at least the fact that that one package validates that these set of models work together, to me, that is probably a very good first step towards. We can try to worry about API packages if that ever becomes a requirement. I do want to suggest that, yes, it should contain some amount of schema mount effort. And if I may even suggest that we have the combination of network instance and routing protocols as one package, or maybe the first package we go and attack, because that's, as you said, is almost the most basic thing any router box will need to have support on. So.
And I think, yes, and I think it makes sense. And I think effectively, if we don't have the API packages, what that leads to is run the IETF building these really big packages, you'll build small ones and put them together into bigger packages. So it might be the IETF defines a large one, just says these all work together, these versions, but no one implements that. And instead you also create smaller ones of particular protocols and their extensions and things like that. So that's what we were thinking.
And finally, on deviations, I feel that it's up to the vendor to add their own set of deviations for what they don't want in the package.
It was about flagging that. So it's just like, does the package have a flag at the top level to say, I've got deviations or not?
Okay, I'm ambivalent about that.
Okay, just put up a quick poll for Rob's last question, but I'm going to transfer to the next slides.
So Balazs and Joe were in queue. Are you saying they should not come into queue, or should they come to queue while the poll is running?
Sorry, while the poll's running, please.
Okay.
Balazs?
Just that in 3GPP, schema mount is used heavily, so it would be good to have it in the draft. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
So obviously, I agree. On the checksum, I didn't think it was needed. I thought just simply having the name of the package and the version in there was canonical enough.
Start with that and see what we need, as in solve the initial problems down. Yeah. I'm a yes on this one. So.
Yeah, there's an implied use case there. And so I think the version is good. Just tightly describe how that version changes over time and during operation. Jumping ahead to how I think you're using it. All right, so thank you for that. Look forward to the continuing work or the renewed work on that. And if anyone is interested in the work and would like to contribute to it, now's a great time to rejoin or join the renewed effort, and look for a link from Rob to the meeting. And with that, Siobhan?
Okay. So this presentation is about the Yang metadata annotation for immutable flag. And actually, since last IETF meeting, the authors didn't make any major updates since the current shape looks already good to us. So, but there still is one question in my mind I think it might be good to if we can get some feedback from the working group. So we have defined a parameter we call the with immutable, which allows the client to opt in and request the server to return the immutable annotations in its response. So the question is, should this document formally update the existing netconf and resconf specifications because of the extensions we have made to these protocol operations. So we're trying to find some examples of this, but it seems that it's not very clear to the authors whether we should do this or not, as there is some inconsistent examples found. For example, the RFC 16243, the with default capability draft defines the extension to the netconf protocol operations, the with defaults input parameter, but doesn't formally update the RFC 16241. But the more recent work, the list pagination work, also has the extensions to support the additional query and input parameters and formally update these RFCs. So the question is whether this draft should formally update these RFCs as well. So the author's preference is that we have the new parameters defined to the original netconf and resconf operations. So we would prefer to formally update these RFCs, but we would like to see if there is any other comments or suggestions from the working group. And go ahead, Ken.
Sorry, finish up, Siobhan.
Okay. So for the next step, if we can converge on the last question, I think we are ready to, unless there is anyone has any objections, we think we are ready to move forward, as the authors currently don't know any open issues now. So that's it.
Okay, so Kent as chair, you may have noticed I started a poll, but Lou and I had actually discussed this earlier this morning, and we thought it was a process issue. Already, we think that the process supports the document updating the base protocol document. It's important that implementers who are trying to implement the protocols are pointed to other documents that are updating it and to be aware of it. So unless there's clear objection, we think that it's okay as is, that this document is updating the 3 RFCs that you mentioned.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Also, Kent as chair, this document has a liaison item on it. And last time there was, I think Rob Wilton had offered to create some text that we would discuss. He did, and it was discussed, but the conversation didn't complete. And so we need to actually complete that conversation, which we'll do so as quickly as possible after the meeting. And then we said also that at the time we do the working group last call, which will be imminent, that we would send that liaison response at that time. So we'll try to do this immediately after the meeting, after the session.
Yeah, and that conversation was happened off list. It would be good that the final text be sent on list for comment before we actually send the liaison. In the future, I don't think we see any reason for proposed liaison text to just not happen on list to start with. You know, that it's fine. Whoever came up with it wanted to do it off list, that's okay. But it on list is also works. And certainly before we do issue liaison, we want the working group to have an opportunity to comment before it's sent. Siobhan, anything else?
She has another presentation.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And I'm loading it up. There we go.
Yes, so this presentation is about a common Young data model for scheduling. So this work, the draft has went through the Young Doctor review from Richard, and the authors really thanks to Richard for the careful review. And I think it's fair to say that no major issue was found, and I will give a brief update status of the document. And based on the Young Doctor review, we have posted a new revision to resolve that. And also there's some offline comment received about the handling of scheduling conflicts. So also incorporate into the new revision. And the document updates a couple of points So we define the frequency and interval terms for the recurrence definition. And there was some renaming for the features, grouping, and parameters defined in the grouping based on the comments and suggestions from the young doctor. And we also clarifying that the detection and the resolution of the schedule conflicts are beyond the scope of this document. And since we have a lot of schedule format representation examples, but there is no protocol accessible nodes defined there is only about grouping definition in the draft. So we fix the examples of this format representation so that they can be validated. And we also try to add more examples to clarify the difference between some parameters of max allowed end and the validity parameters inside the generic schedule parameters grouping. So this gives the document updates. And for the next steps, the authors think that there is no open issue so far. So we believe this document is stable. So that's we would request working group last call after this meeting. And we also suggest the working group last call to also be sent to the following working groups, which includes the TVR and Ops area working group. They have the consumer drafts that use the schedule groupings defining this work, and also the calendar extension working group in the art area, since we borrow some idea of the recurrence definition from their effort. And at the same time, we would also request some directorate reviews with the working group last call. So I think that's it from my side. Any comments and questions?
Okay, well, as chair, certainly we can request the reviews from the various directorates and initiate a working group last call. So thank you.
Thank you.
Do you really think we need early reviews? Because normally all of those directorates review the document as part of IESG last call, and we as chairs initiate early reviews. Are you asking for early reviews in all those areas? We'll do it, but we generally don't.
Not those areas.
No.
Important areas.
No, the ones listed.
Oh, okay.
Would you like early reviews in all the listed areas?
No, maybe just the last call review would be good, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Joe?
Joe Clark as Ops AWG co-chair. Chufeng, yes, I do think a last call review in our group is good. Have you updated the ACL draft to accommodate some of these changes so that that'll all
Yes.
fit together? Okay, thank you.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay, I want to announce that we're moving to the uncharted area.
Sure. So we now are moving into the non-working group document section. We have 3 documents. We're going to give them, notwithstanding what it says on the agenda, we're going to give them all about 10 minutes since that's what we have left. I'm going to, well, you'll go over 30 seconds. That's all right.
Thank you. I'm Kent, presenting Gang Next. Very good. Okay, so first, as a reminder, I presented this in IETF 120. There was the RFC 7950 Biz and Friends presentation. And during that, at the end of that presentation, there was a request to put together a list of motivation and objectives that we can discuss whether we need a 1.1, a 1.2, or a 2.0, and that's exactly what the last 2 slides of this presentation will do. But before we get there, quickly, context. The Yang Next issue tracker on GitHub had nearly 150 issues open. More than half of the issues were not scored. That was how we went into this. And hence there was a desire/need to finish scoring those issues. But that entails having a scoring team. And so we got thank you everyone who joined the scoring team. 10 individuals were heavily involved. We met every other week since IETF 120, 6 separate get meetings, about 2 hours each. And but those 2 hours alone don't account for all the extra time that went into entering the issues into the issue tracker, as well as reviewing the issues prior to those meetings occurring. I estimate that likely more than 80 man-hours of time was expended since IETF 120 to get us to this presentation. Scoring results. So originally we had, I mentioned 150, but we did close some issues. So then we had 118 open issues, and most of them were not scored. Currently now there's 112 open issues. 39 of them are we scored as importance high. 49 of them were importance medium, and 24 of them importance low. Be mindful that when we say importance low, we effectively mean we're not going to look at them again. They're off the table. Very grossly speaking, I mean, rough categories, but a lot of the issues related to making Yang easier to use, issues related to conformance. So if you implement a module that has a bunch of identities, does it actually mean that you support each and every one of those identities? How do we go about allowing servers to acknowledge or specify or indicate which identities or extension statements or other things they actually implement? And also reusability. There was a lot of discussion or comments about groupings and how groupings aren't initially written to support reusability in the best ways possible, and is there a way that we could actually reuse containers? And so there was many more issues, but there were quite a number of issues that circling around these 3 points. So to those 2 questions, motivation and objectives. First, motivation. Yang is very old currently and showing limitations, hence all the issues that were filed over the years. And an update would help quell some discontent that we're hearing. And the objectives would be to publish a 2.0, not a 1.2. And this is from the scoring team, what we believe is the way that needs to be done, mostly because of the blue highlight there. Many of the high and medium issues are not backwards compatible. So it couldn't be a 1.2 if we wanted to address those high medium issues. And so in conclusion, we see that there's significant interest, the amount of effort that went into getting us here. And also we think that getting it over the line is going to take a few years. The question to the working group, this is the last slide, how to proceed. And I don't have slides for it, but there's a question about who's interested in participating. And in particular, when it comes to participation, we would have a GitHub repository. I mentioned this last session, in 120, GitHub repository, pull requests. Anyone could submit a pull request, but there'd have to be a team of reviewers to review those pull requests. So the question of who's interested in participating is who would be interested in being on that pull request review team. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Ken, can you go back a couple of slides?
Yep. How many?
To the one that had the review team.
Yep.
The previous review team.
I'm getting there.
Yeah. Okay. So can you describe how this team was selected and how it operated?
Sure. So I think initially I mentioned in the 120 session, I asked who would be interested, send me an email. And so some people sent me emails. I think I reached out maybe to a few more people. So that was basically it.
Right. So, and you also announced it on the list that the meetings were going to be happening, right?
I did one, yes.
So this was basically announced, open to all, and then self-selected. So it was pretty loose and no formal appointments, no design team, nothing in session, self-organized, self-selected. Of course, the working group is going to have to bless any work that comes out of it, but it was fairly loose. Can you describe what you're proposing for the future?
So the members of the scoring team does not necessitate being a member of the review team. So again, it would be open to the working group, whoever would like to participate in that review team I mentioned before. If the working group wishes for the review team to be a design team, like a formal design team, that's possible, or it doesn't have to be a formal design, it could be informal as well.
Yeah, I personally like the informal self-organizing approach. And those people who do the work don't have a lot of process to deal with. But of course, the end result comes back to our process in the working group. So I personally like that. But I'd like to hear from the working group on their thoughts on it. And I know Andy's going to talk a little bit, so I'd like to hear his opinion. Then I'll ask again after he presents, but if he doesn't come to the mic now.
So thank you, Ken, for organising all this. I mean, it's a potentially big amount of work that we're opening up here, so I think we need to be careful. I think when we're going through and scoring those issues, it feels like it's like a scattergun of issues that everyone's raised their ideas and things like that, and we were scoring them as to how important they are, high and medium, and sometimes that's quite hard to score them on that category and importance and backwards compatibility. For me, I think it would be really useful to have a better view of what's the next product we are building. So what the Yang Next looks like, what it's solving. So this is the goals it's going to achieve, and here's a concrete proposal of we want to include this list of things as a starting point and exclude these other ones. And it might not even be all of the high priority ones. It might not be all the medium ones. It might be a subset of those, but something to go through, or maybe a couple of different options to say we could build a big version of Yang 2.0 and have all these things. We could do a lighter version that would have this set of things. And I think that would, for me, be really useful to see the direction where it's going before we sort of dig in and start making lots of changes. That's what I would like to see, and then we get consensus like, yes, this is where we want to go, and yes, for the vendors and consumers, like, yes, if we did this, we would use this version of Yang and we would and make use of it effectively. So I think that's what I would like to see the next step is, but again, that's another piece of work. That's just my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Oops, sorry,
Andy
someone
in the
else.
queue?
We have Andy in queue.
Hi, Lou, you asked what I thought of the process and stuff. I've actually put a lot of hours myself into going through every single issue on the list more than once. There's a lot of improvements in store. Many of the issues were related to Yang's too difficult to use. Why does Yang prevent me from doing this? And we already have done what Rob asked. There are the high and medium issues are the ones that are in scope, and the ones that are low importance are being left out. And within the 60 or so issues, there's a lot of detailed things. So I agree, you need to see a high level view of what's going into Yang next. But it kind of needs to just be developed on its own, doesn't it? It just like any other draft. It's subject to change along the way in reviews. So
Rob, can I just speak to that point? So my concern with that is that we could spend 4 years building something that at the end there isn't consensus to publish. And that's the thing we want to avoid. Like the versioning work, we spent a lot of time producing things, and right at the last call, working with last call, the various people said, actually, we don't like this. We don't want this. You need to go back and reinvent it again. And that's what I want to avoid. I want to get some level of consensus of, yes, the working group agrees this is the right thing to be building. It's going to have these feature enhancements in that next specification without the details, like a list of taking those list of issues we have and sort of summarizing them in groups and saying, we're going to do these things and have that summary list, and this is what Yang Next will be, and get consensus. And sometimes like, yes, this is what we want to build, and then go ahead and start doing the work, rather than doing all the work and then finding out actually there isn't consensus. We'll say, actually, we don't, it's too complicated. We don't want to deploy this.
So what I hear you saying is you'd like to take the results of the scoring and get a draft written that captures the sort of the categories being worked on, and then get that document adopted as a working group document, so that that adoption process gets buy-in from the working group on the topics.
Yeah, some way of checking that, yes, effectively, of saying, look, does the working group agree this is the right direction, that we're going to invest lots of time in doing this, that effectively people are like, yes, we know this is going to do. Because if we add another 100 pages to the Yang spec, which is possible with that long list of issues, is that going to be Yang that people want to deploy and use?
Yeah, I think that's actually an excellent suggestion. My first reaction was we don't need to document any of this, but the base question is from Kent is where do we need to be on process? What's the right process? And getting buy-in from the working group on the topics being worked on outside of the working group, I think is a great idea. I think it's a really good idea.
Get buy-in
And
on the scope.
worthwhile.
Yeah.
To get that buy-in to make sure that the scope is within, I hate to say it, it's almost like a mini charter of a design team without that process, the heavyweight process of the design team.
Yeah, I was gonna reply or say something just like Andy, but to your point, I almost question what choice do we have? As I mentioned in 120, if we don't do this, we should close the working group.
No, to disagree on that. So I think there's two choices here. I think that you could build a lighter extent, like a Yang 1.2. I don't mean backwards compatible, but with a smaller number of changes, you're deliberately trying to make the next update small and focus on the highest priority top 10 things and say, look, we'll make it a little bit better, but we don't want to move the language very far. We're just going to make it a little bit better. And that's easier for people to adopt. And maybe that would solve the top pain points that people care about. So that's one option. Another option is to go the other way and say, no, we're going to address a lot of these issues and we're going to make Yang quite different language that covers more things it can do, but it's going to be a bigger language, more complicated language. And the migration step from Yang 1.1 to 2.0, this larger change is much more significant. And the risk is we end up in like a second system syndrome where we add too much stuff in and the language becomes too big and unwieldy and it doesn't get used for that reason the same way. Or the same way that we're using XPath 1.0 rather than 2.0 or 3.0 is those languages became from what was very small and imperfect to languages that were much, much larger. And we just need to be careful that we know where we're going to, and we've got consensus to go that direction before we go and find out we're there, and that's not where we want to be.
Okay. All right. It sounds like a lot of work still to do what you're suggesting, but I know we have a couple more presenters, so I'm going to sit down. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Andy? Good to see you, Andy.
Hi. How do I do the slide control?
You should have buttons underneath your slide. If you move the mouse at the bottom, you should have buttons.
I just gave you control. You should be able to do it now.
Okay. All right. I started a project called Yang++. I didn't realize how much baggage would come with that, but probably not a good choice of naming. This is focusing on a couple issues that are already in Yang Next on reusability. So just a couple of quick things about the project. There's a GitHub repo and some docs online. So the high level view is that there's only two statements added to Yang. It's a misconception that this is an entirely different language. It just adds two statements. And a class is a cross between a grouping and a mount point, and a uses class is just like a uses, except it works like an identity ref. And I'll go into a little bit about that. So also real quick on groupings, everyone is clear that the groupings are purely conceptual, and you have to have an accessible uses statement to actually bring them into the schema tree. And the schema tree is really all that a tool actually needs to do validation. And in fact, I don't know of any servers that hold on to the groupings and other metadata, kind of expands them, but doesn't need them after that. So identifying 4 problems with groupings that I'll go into more detail. I don't really need to focus on this slide. And the first one is there was some work done a while back. Our area director is one of the authors on this RFC 6095 that had like complex types like XXD and virtualization, and it didn't really go anywhere. And so I kind of picked up a little on that to try to look at reusability issues in Yang. So some of the problems that it's not a layered approach, and so I'll go to my examples. One of my pet peeves that I see in all the Yang modules I review is these empty mandatory choices that obviously need an augment in order for the Yang module to be valid. So one of the goals of the work I'm doing in Yang++ is to make machine readable statements that expose these kind of layered dependencies. So this is showing that there's a mandatory case that needs to be replaced with from a virtual case to a concrete case. And I'm not going to go into how this works and everything. That's not what this presentation is about. I'm just trying to point out these issues that groupings don't support. And then the other kind of abstraction layer is the models kind of right from the RFC, where there's virtual actions and virtual config, and then concrete classes have to fill them in. So this sort of layering, the open question is, do we need this sort of thing? I think I know a lot of IETF people that could make good use of this sort of thing. Another issue is cross references. Really the biggest issue with reusability in groupings, the stickiest point actually, are the cross references. So they show up in the XPath, must when, and path statements. So Yang has absolutely no concept that there are these different kinds of references. There's references within the current grouping. There's references that we'd like to make to an external grouping, but keep it at the abstract level, and that red arrow indicates that we don't have this at all. So all of the cross references in groupings are really made to the final schema tree or a relative schema tree. So the problem is that the XPath context and document root depends on the uses location. So it makes writing these cross references in the grouping really challenging. So the the work for Yang next to think about is what can we do to make this better for reusability, not saying that there's a good solution. I started on some solutions, and then they have their own problems. So this is the problem. Actually, I should have been on this slide, is that they're not that relocatable because of the XPath. And the solution paths definitely improve the documentation. I think doing that is the easiest thing to do, is when you're writing the grouping, highlight all the issues that someone using the grouping would run into. And Yang next issue number 80 points out the mailing list discussion that was on defaults in groupings. So that's a kind of dependency that needs to be handled. And then there's other kinds of things that can be done. There's a proposal in Yang++ about position independent Yang. You might want to take a look at. So in this example, what it's showing is that the capabilities are not necessarily bound to the schema tree. One class would like to just make a must statement that references the capabilities, and then those aren't rigid where they are in the model. So there's late binding to where those push settings would actually be. And this is probably the biggest issue. And in fact, I started this work because Balazs was telling me how much he wanted this and why we couldn't have it. And this was discussed in Yang 1.1 and left out because it's too hard. It probably still is too hard, but it would be really useful to be able to do this instead of just managing all the different places that the uses are expanded, and that has a lot of problems. And I've seen some really large vendor annotations and deviations, with hundreds of statements in them, and it can get difficult to manage. So the grouping solution is rather difficult. I think there's already some work underway that might make it easier, like the augmented by solution and Yang packages. Seems like Yang packages is a solution that's like all these complex coordination issues. Yang packages will solve it. So I'm looking forward to that. But there is, augment grouping would be very powerful, but it seems very complicated to implement. And the Yang plus proposal is actually too simplistic, and single inheritance won't really work. So something in between might be the appropriate solution path. And going quickly through this example, like you can see that I'd like to use the grouping US address, but all of the places that the uses is for address. So it can't really do that. And the fixed and non-replaceable. So another approach for this could be you just declare in the Yang library that when you see grouping foo, it really use grouping bar. Just do a mapping and let the vendors and even the standards create groupings that are improvements. Or I think one of the problems with groupings is they have to be done all at once. It creates these long development efforts. So that's essentially the problems to look at. The replaceable groupings example. So it would, you'd have a Yang library binding to say what class you're actually using for address. And I think in all of my examples, you can replace the word class for grouping, and any solution that I've been proposing for classes could also be done for groupings.
Hey, Andy, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you really have to wrap up.
All right, I'm done. So the next steps is to figure out what to work on, if anything, and move on with Yang 2.0.
All right, Andy, I appreciate it. One very quick question: do you see any issue with working with the team Kent is trying to put together on Yang next, which Yang 2.0? You see any issue working with them on that?
No, I don't see a problem with a formal design team that is open to anybody and meets bi-weekly. I
Great.
think that's what.
Thank you. With that, we're going to move to Balazs, and I should have said, if anyone has any questions on what Andy presented, please bring it to the list. Balazs?
Hello. So this is a strange problem because it's not exactly a document problem, but more our procedures are working in a problematic way. So the problem is that we publish RFCs with Yang modules, but sometimes there are bugs in our Yang modules. But updating these takes a long time. We create errata for the RFC itself, but the Yang module is not published again. So what can a vendor or user do? They can do their own updates, which is really violating every principle that you update someone else's module. What dates would you use? but they need corrections urgently in weeks instead of years. So this is a problem we need to solve. What goals we need to keep? Yes, these are IETF or IANA modules, so we should keep control of what's happening with them. But we need to be faster in our updates. And we need to publish somewhere a module on IETF or IANA websites that is a complete module and you can just download it as a vendor or a user and use it. So not a few lines stating that, yes, this should be changed somehow, but a complete new version of that module. And my proposal for this, which is a long-standing problem, and by the way, just on a quick overview, we identified already 6 Yang modules that have errata that would change the module, but yeah, they are not published anywhere. So this is an existing and common problem. So when you write an errata, that should be possible to update the module based on that errata. Also, when you publish your errata, it will be verified, it will be checked just as today. But as part of the errata or associated to the errata, you should produce a new version of the module. That should have a new revision statement stating actually which errata you are publishing or correcting. And we need an official place to publish these Yang modules. To me, the IANA Yang parameters registry seems to be the best and most official place to publish it. So I would like to ask the group to discuss if this is a good proposal, and if it is, then how do we promote this? How do we make IANA and all the relevant authorities actually execute according to this? By the way, the problem was raised as part of Yang Next, and I think all of us agree that this is an important problem, but this is not really a problem to be solved with an RFC or something like that. It's more a procedure problem. Thank you. Comments?
Mahesh, Balaz, I couldn't agree with you more on the need to somehow provide a quicker way to update models. I think this problem has been highlighted before. And as you kind of mentioned, errata is probably not the right way to address it simply because errata is very targeted and very focused on what can be changed. So definitely, I wouldn't try to push the errata envelope to try to fix this. I think from a process perspective, we need to look at what will it take to update a model, and do we need to update the corresponding RFC, or where should the model be kept in an effort to try to be able to update it. I think the problem right now we have is because it's embedded within the RFC, the only way to rev it is through essentially writing a BIS version of the draft, and we know how long that takes. So certainly, I'm open to the community trying to say that yes, we need a faster process, and first of all, does the Yang model belong in an RFC, or should it be in a more in a location where it can be updated more easily?
I am trying to propose.
Go ahead, Blush.
I'm trying to propose something that is a relatively smaller change to our processes, and it reuses the verification process of the RFC or the erratas already, and the IANA, which is already publishing process. So maybe this can be agreed faster than the completely new something. Thank you.
Hi, Scott Mansfield. I agree that this is an issue, and from my perfectly selfish perspective of dealing with many other standards bodies, the ability to have the Yang modules in the Yang GitHub repository that we have is fantastic. And the automatic tooling that we have that pulls it out of internet drafts and RFCs is fantastic. I would love to see if there would be any way to, oh, there's an errata. How about some tooling that just sticks it in the Yang GitHub repository? That would be fantastic. So that's about that would be my Nirvana solution anyway. Another way is just we do a lot with GitHub now. So we could conceivably put the Yang in a GitHub repository and point to it. That's another way, very quick, very fast way of doing it that would allow us to have our interoperability with other standards bodies and even within the working groups in the IETF. So thanks.
So I think I'm next. I'm not sure which hat I'm going to speak with, but this is Lou Berger. We had decided, I think, when Rob was AD, to run an experiment to see how fast we could get a minor revision through the process. And we had a lot of discussions of could we actually do it quickly. And we had agreement to try to be very on how we would get it through the whole process from chair through ISG and hopefully, through the RFC editor. The problem was that the authors couldn't agree on the change. And so what looked like should have been a really quick thing dragged out because the authors kept saying, we're not ready yet. So if we could take a step back and say, could we have an automated process that allows us to BIS an RFC as soon as we get the errata, or someone who's willing to run this as a test, take an errata, maybe Balazs, you're willing to do this, take your favorite errata, do a BIS, and let's see how fast we can run the process. And then one of the key points there, and Rob, I think you had made it, was that when he was AD, was that we were going to ask the ISG to focus on just the changes rather than trying to review the whole document.
We did run a very similar experiment on the BFT model that we updated through a BIS. It required exactly 3 small changes, and it took 1 year.
Unfortunately for the IETF, that's fast.
Right. Thanks, Balazs and Lou, for being IETF that fast. I just want to bring up basically, this is not just a Yang module issue. This is a general issue at IETF. We need incrementable development capabilities. We cannot wait for 1 year just to have 2 or 3 lines of changes. So I rather would like to address this more holistically, not just to Yang modules.
I think as Yang modules are versioned and carefully controlled, it's more of a problem for Yang modules. Thank you.
Okay.
So Per Andersson, thanks, Balazs. I think this is a great suggestion. Just to be clear, you suggest to use the erratas and then update the Yang model in full in the Yang parameters registry.
Yes.
The only issue I see is that we would need a new revision added. But otherwise, I think it's a great suggestion.
Yes, definitely. Last
Thank
point.
Rob Wilson, I think we should do something here. So I think we should try and solve this properly down the line. I think as Mahesh spoke to, as Thomas has spoken to, but actually it takes a long time to get those things done, and I still don't know how long it takes to do it. So we could be here another 4 years' time having the same conversation. So this seems to be quite small. I think we should try and do either this or run it fast through the process where we have some tooling that generates a minimal diff document that just points you to something, and it's just like here's the document, here's the patch that's being applied, here's the new revision. So it would go through the IETF process in that sense, but the document would be like a page, and most of the stuff would be outside. It doesn't contain a whole new version of the module, that sort of thing. I wonder whether that's possible, but I think trying to just update the erratas and do an IANA might be a reasonable way. I think that Mahesh will find it hard to push this in the ISG, but I think that Balazs, you should write up a document for this that you have, and give it to Mahesh to present to the ISG and see what the consensus is. I mean, is there any willingness to do that? If not, I think we should try and do it. But again, you may get pushed back during the rest of the IETF process. This stuff's painful.
Italo, I think there are 2 issues here. First is, for example, looking at the Semver discussion. One is creating a patch And I think maybe the errata and doing a patch in a fast way is a good idea. The second one is to have a fast way to do minor revision, like I think Lou is referring to 8776 bis, which actually it failed, but the reason why it failed is exactly the problem. Because it failed because after we opened the RFC 8776 bis, we discovered there were a lot of other changes that were needed, and people spread around in the wrong place because they were not brave enough to open a BIS. So the point is that people is scared to the death to create a BIS to an RFC, to do a small change. And there were a lot of many small changes that altogether become a big bunch of changes. So I think the experiment has failed by itself because the required changes were not small. But I think the issue of having a process to do a fast piece for small changes is an important issue to be addressed. And I think it's a little bit different than the errata, because the errata is a small patch, it's not a small update. But I think both issues are important to be addressed, in my opinion.
As a closing contributor comment, I just think that it'd be good for when the RFC editor applies the errata, some sort of notification, maybe a calendar reminder, something like that is created, reminding the chairs, reminding the working group, create this working biz and get it published quickly. So there's a push from RFC editor to get that biz out the door. And then finally, as chair, thank you everyone for attending the session. We had quite a turnout and a great conversation discussion.
Yeah, and with that, unfortunately, we are over. Appreciate everyone staying in the room. There are probably cookies outside, I don't know, but we hope to see you all Thursday. Balazs, thank you for bringing up a really great topic, and I hope we see, we hope we're willing to run the experiment of the BIS. You don't have to do anything to do that. And also, I think the document describing what you're changing, maybe run both of them in parallel. Thank you all. See you Thursday.
Yeah, you caught it already, but there's no disagreement about an author not being able to.
I screwed up. I meant to the question. I got distracted because I'm running a working group, but I shouldn't do it.